The morning sun cut through the fog at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado like a blade through silk. Catherine Brennan stood at the 200-yard line of the rifle range, her M4A1 carbine feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her trembling hands. The weapon was familiar. She'd qualified with it a dozen times. But familiarity didn't equal mastery. Not here. Not now. Not with 5 Navy SEALs watching her like hawks circling wounded prey. She aligned the iron sights, controlled her breathing the way the manuals taught, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked. The target downrange barely flinched. She fired again. And again. 5 rounds. Then 10. When the range officer called ceasefire, Kate lowered the weapon and waited for the verdict she already knew. Lieutenant Blake Thornton walked to the spotting scope, his desert tan uniform crisp despite the humidity rolling off the Pacific. He was 34, movie star handsome in that weathered warrior way, with a bronze star and 2 purple hearts that gave him the right to be as arrogant as he was. He looked through the scope for exactly 3 seconds before standing up straight. 6-inch grouping at 200 yards, he announced, his voice carrying across the range like a judge pronouncing sentence. That's barely qualification standard, Brennan. My grandmother shoots better than that, and she's got arthritis in both hands. The other SEALs didn't even try to hide their laughter. Petty Officer Connor McLeod, a ginger-haired weapons specialist from Tennessee, who looked like he'd been carved from granite, was the loudest. 3 years you've been trying to improve those scores, ma'am. 3 years. Still shooting like an analyst. Because that's what she was, an analyst. Catherine Brennan, 27 years old, naval intelligence specialist with a master's degree from Georgetown and a security clearance that could open doors most people didn't know existed. She could tell you the blast radius of a Russian FAB-500 bomb, decode intercepts in 3 languages, and identify weapons systems from satellite imagery that looked like pixelated garbage to everyone else. But put her on a range with a rifle, and she shot like someone who'd learned from books instead of battlefields. I'll improve, sir, Kate said quietly, already knowing how pathetic it sounded. Will you? Thornton handed the carbine back to the range officer. Because we've got real operators waiting for range time. Operators who might actually hit what they're aiming at. Kate felt the heat rising in her cheeks. Not anger, she'd buried that years ago, but shame. The kind that makes your skin tight and your stomach hollow. She nodded once and turned to leave, but Petty Officer McLeod wasn't done. Hey, Brennan, he called out. Quick question. When the bullets start flying for real, you gonna analyze the enemy to death? Maybe bore them into surrendering? More laughter. Chief Garrett Sullivan, the team's sniper instructor, didn't laugh, but he didn't defend her either. He just shook his head and went back to cleaning his rifle, a customized M40A3 that he'd carried through Fallujah and Kandahar. To him, Kate wasn't even worth the breath it would take to mock her. She walked off the range with her shoulders straight and her eyes forward, because that's what her father would have done. Colonel David Brennan hadn't raised a quitter. Of course, he hadn't raised much of anything. He'd been too busy being a Marine, and then too busy being dead. The Pacific Ocean stretched out beyond the base, gray-green and infinite. Kate found herself staring at it, the way she always did when the weight got too heavy. Her father had looked at this same ocean before deploying to Iraq in 2006. She'd been 8 years old, small for her age, with her mother's dark hair and her father's green eyes. He'd knelt down on their driveway in San Diego, his uniform still smelling like starch and determination. I'll be back before summer, he'd promised. We'll go to the zoo. You still want to see the polar bears? She'd nodded, already crying, already knowing somehow that promises made in uniform had a way of breaking. He died in Fallujah on a Tuesday, a roadside bomb, improvised explosive device, they called it, like giving it a technical name made it less devastating. The Marines said he'd saved 6 men by identifying the secondary device before anyone else saw it. They gave her mother a flag and a medal, in words that meant nothing to an 8-year-old girl who just wanted her daddy back. Kate had been raised by her grandfather after that. General Warren Brennan, U.S. Army, retired. Not retired by choice. The Cold War had ended, and the new army didn't have much use for men who spoke Russian and German, and remembered when the world was simpler. When the enemies wore uniforms, and the lines were clear, and you knew who you were fighting and why. Warren had turned their home in Virginia into a classroom. While other girls her age were learning algebra and practicing for soccer, Kate was studying Soviet military doctrine, memorizing the specifications of T-72 tanks, learning to read Cyrillic script. Her grandfather would spread maps across the dining room table. East Berlin, Prague, Moscow, and trace the routes he'd taken as a young intelligence officer when the wall was still standing and the world held its breath, waiting for nuclear winter. "The Soviets think different," he'd told her once, his finger tracing a street in Prague she'd never seen. "They build redundancies into everything, escape routes, hidden passages. They assume failure and plan for it. If you understand how they think, you can predict what they'll do." She'd absorbed it all like a sponge, hungry for anything that connected her to the grandfather who'd become her world. Languages came easy: Russian, German, basic Arabic. Technical analysis became second nature. By 16, she could identify aircraft by their engine signatures. By 20, she had job offers from agencies that didn't officially exist. But shooting? Hand-to-hand combat? The physical skills her father had mastered? Those remained frustratingly out of reach. Her hands shook. Her breath control was terrible. When she ran the obstacle course, she finished last. When she did push-ups, she struggled to reach 20. "You've got your father's mind," her grandfather would say. "That's worth more than muscle." But tell that to Lieutenant Thornton. Tell that to the SEALs who measured worth in confirmed kills and combat deployments. The Intelligence Operations Center at Naval Base San Diego occupied a nondescript building that most people walked past without a second glance. Inside, it was all fluorescent lights and computer screens, secure terminals and classified briefings. This was Kate's world. Behind a keyboard, she was lethal. Behind a rifle, she was a liability. She sat at her desk and pulled up the morning's intercept reports. Syria, Iraq, the usual chaos of the Middle East, filtered through satellite imagery and signals intelligence. Her screen showed a compound near the Syrian border, heat signatures tracked over 3 days, patterns analyzed and cross-referenced. "Brennan," she looked up. Commander Marcus Blackwood stood in her cubicle entrance, filling the space like a bear in a hallway. He was 58, but looked older, his face weathered by decades of deployments to places that didn't exist on official records. Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, places where men went to fight wars that never made the evening news. Marcus Blackwood had been her father's commanding officer. He'd been there in Fallujah when David Brennan had spotted that second IED. He'd written the letter to her mother, attended the funeral, checked in every year on the anniversary. He was the closest thing to her father she had left. "Sir," Kate stood, instinctively straightening her uniform. "Conference room, now." His voice was gravel and steel. "Bring everything you have on Dmitry Volkov." Kate's blood went cold. Dmitry Volkov, former Spetsnaz, current arms dealer and warlord operating in the chaos where Syria and Iraq bled into each other. She'd been tracking him for 6 months, watching his network metastasize across the region like cancer. Volkov was old-school Soviet, trained in the dying days of the USSR, and he'd taken those skills into the private sector when the wall fell and the world stopped caring about ideology. She grabbed her laptop and files and followed Blackwood down the corridor. The conference room was already crowded. Lieutenant Thornton, Chief Sullivan, McLeod, and the others from the range. They looked at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. Blackwood closed the door and dimmed the lights. The projector hummed to life. 72 hours ago, Blackwood began, an American aid worker was kidnapped near Al-Hasaka in northeastern Syria. Rebecca Walsh, 24, from Billings, Montana. She's been working with an orphanage, doing genuinely good work in a genuinely bad place. The screen showed a photo. Blonde woman, bright smile, holding a small child. The kind of photo that appeared on news channels when Americans were killed overseas. Sanitized tragedy for the masses. We have intelligence indicating she's being held by Dmitry Volkov's network, Blackwood continued. Volkov's planning to sell her to a Chechen militant group within 48 hours. Once she's moved, we lose her, forever. The room was silent. These men had done hostage rescue before. They knew the odds. They knew what happened to American prisoners in that part of the world. SEAL Team 3 is tasked with extraction, Blackwood said. Wheels up in 48 hours. You'll insert near the Syrian border, locate the hostage, and extract. Fast and quiet. In and out before anyone knows you were there. Thornton leaned forward. Intel package, sir? That's why Analyst Brennan is here. Blackwood gestured to Kate. She's been tracking Volkov for 6 months. She knows his patterns, his network, his operational security. She'll brief you on, she's coming with us. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Kate stared at Blackwood, certain she'd misheard. The SEALs stared too, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief to outright anger. Sir, Thornton said carefully, with all due respect, Analyst Brennan is intelligence support. She belongs in the TOC, not on the ground. She's the only one who speaks fluent Russian, Blackwood replied. Volkov's network uses Russian for operational communications. We intercept something mid-mission. We need real-time translation. Not satellite delay, not relayed through channels. Real-time. We have interpreters who don't know Volkov's patterns like she does, who haven't spent 6 months inside his head. Blackwood's voice carried the weight of command, the kind that didn't invite debate. Brennan deploys with a team. That's the order. McLeod laughed. Actually laughed. Commander, she can't even shoot qual scores. We saw her this morning. 6-inch grouping at 200 yards. She's never been outside the wire. This is a direct action mission, not a classroom exercise. I don't recall asking for your opinion, Petty Officer. Sir, she'll slow us down, Thornton pressed. She'll be a liability. Someone will have to babysit her instead of focusing on the mission. Kate wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never come back. Every word was true. She knew it. They knew it. Blackwood knew it. But Blackwood's expression didn't change. My decision is final. Brennan goes. You'll have 48 hours to prepare her. Make it count. He looked at Kate, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't read. Not pity, not doubt, something else. You wanted to honor your father, Analyst Brennan? Blackwood said quietly. Here's your chance. The meeting ended. The SEALs filed out, their silence more damning than any words. Kate stood alone in the conference room, staring at Rebecca Walsh's photo on the screen, feeling like she'd just been sentenced to death. The next 48 hours were hell. They started in the equipment cage, where Kate was issued gear that felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone capable. M4A1 carbine, Sig Sauer M18 sidearm, plate carrier with ceramic plates that added 30 pounds to her frame, helmet, night vision, radio, medical kit, ammunition. Each item was necessary. Each item was another reminder that she didn't belong. Day one was physical conditioning. Chief Sullivan ran them through movement drills, low crawls, high crawls, tactical bounds. The SEALs flowed through the exercises like water, smooth and efficient. Kate stumbled through like a drunk giraffe. Her muscles screamed, her lungs burned. She fell behind on every drill, leaving muddy trails where she'd face-planted in the dirt. Move, Brennan, Sullivan barked. You think the enemy's going to wait for you to catch your breath? She pushed harder, faster. Her vision tunneled. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She finished the course last, covered in mud, gasping for air while the SEALs looked fresh enough to run it again. Day 2 was close quarters battle. They ran drills in the kill house, practicing room entries and target identification. Kate was slow on the door, slow acquiring targets, slow on everything that mattered. In a real firefight, slow meant dead. "You're thinking too much," Thornton told her after she froze in a doorway for the third time. "Combat's not about thinking, it's about reacting. Muscle memory. You don't have that." That evening, McLeod started a betting pool. Kate overheard him in the chow hall, his voice carrying over the clatter of trays and conversation. "$20 says she quits before Wheels Up," he announced. "50 says she makes it to the aircraft but refuses to jump." They laughed, placed their bets, discussed her failure like it was inevitable. Kate ate her meal alone, each bite tasting like sawdust, and wondered if they were right. The worst moment came late on day 2. Kate was in the equipment shed, checking her kit, when she heard voices outside. Thornton and Sullivan. They didn't know she was there. "Blackwood's lost his mind," Thornton said. "Bringing an analyst on a direct action mission. She's going to get someone killed." "You know why he's doing it," Sullivan replied. "David Brennan saved his life in Fallujah. Took 3 rounds that were meant for the commander. Blackwood's been carrying that debt for 18 years. So he pays it back by getting us killed? By getting David's daughter killed? That's some twisted logic." Kate stood frozen, her hands gripping her rifle. So that was it. She wasn't here because she was capable. She was here because Marcus Blackwood felt guilty about surviving when her father didn't. That night, she couldn't sleep. At 0200, she gave up and went to the chapel. It was empty at that hour, just her in the quiet and the weight of 18 years of trying to live up to a ghost. She sat in the front pew and looked at the memorial wall, where names of fallen sailors were engraved in brass. Her father's name wasn't there. He was a Marine, not Navy, but she imagined it anyway. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered to the empty chapel. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." The chapel didn't answer. She was still sitting there when Commander Blackwood found her an hour before dawn. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside her, his bulk making the wood creak. "They think I'm only going because you feel guilty," Kate said finally, "about my father." Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Your father saved my life in Fallujah," he said. "I watched him die on that street while I stood there useless, alive because he was better than me, faster than me, braver than me. So you do feel guilty, every goddamn day." Blackwood turned to look at her. "But that's not why you're going." He pulled out a tablet and brought up a file. Photos, intelligence reports. "Dmitry Volkov. You know what these are? Kornet anti-tank missiles, Russian-made, sold to Iraqi insurgents. Your father's convoy was hit by 3 Kornets on that street in Fallujah," Blackwood said. "We traced them back to a supplier. It took us 8 years, but we found him. Dmitry Volkov. He sold those missiles to the men who killed your father." Kate's hands went cold. "You're bringing me because you've been tracking Volkov for 6 months, and you know him better than anyone. You speak his language. You understand Soviet tactics because your grandfather taught you. You can think the way he thinks." Blackwood closed the tablet. "The guilt? That's mine to carry. But your presence on this mission is tactical, necessary. What if I freeze? Then people die, including you." Blackwood stood. "But I don't think you will, because you're here at 0300, terrified but still preparing to board that aircraft. Cowards run. Warriors face their fear and move forward anyway." At 1800 hours, they loaded into vans for the drive to the airfield. Kate sat in silence, her gear heavy on her lap, watching San Diego pass by the window. The MH-47 Chinook waited on the tarmac, its rotors already turning. The crew chief helped her aboard. She found a seat along the webbing, strapped in, and watched the SEALs perform their final checks. The engines roared, the aircraft lifted. San Diego fell away beneath them. Kate closed her eyes and felt the vibration of the rotors in her bones. This was it. No turning back now. McLeod was watching her from across the cargo bay. He said something to Sullivan, and they both looked at her. Kate met McLeod's eyes and held them until he looked away first. Small victory. Meaningless, really. But she'd take it. The desert night was colder than Kate had imagined. The Chinook had dropped them 8 kilometers from the target compound. Now there was only darkness and 7 people who moved like ghosts. Lieutenant Thornton led the patrol in a tactical column. Kate was positioned third in line, sandwiched between McLeod and Petty Officer James Hendricks. The formation was designed to protect her. She knew that. She also knew it meant they didn't trust her. The terrain was brutal. Rocky outcroppings gave way to sandy wadis that grabbed at her boots. Her pack dug into her shoulders. The rifle grew heavier with each step. Within the first hour, her legs were burning. They moved in silence, hand signals only. Kate tried to match Thornton's pace, but she was too slow. The gap kept widening. McLeod would nudge her forward with increasing irritation. After 2 hours, they paused for a security halt. Kate dropped to one knee, gasping for air. The SEALs barely looked winded. 5 minutes later, they moved out again. The third hour was worse. Kate's vision started tunneling. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. She stumbled over a rock and nearly went down, caught herself at the last second, felt McLeod's hand on her pack, steadying her. "You good?" he whispered. Kate nodded because she couldn't spare the breath to answer. They reached the overwatch position at 02:30 hours, a rocky ridge 400 meters from the target compound. Kate collapsed behind a boulder, every muscle shaking. Sullivan set up the observation post with practiced efficiency, spotting scope, thermal imaging, satellite communications. Within minutes, they had a clear view of the compound below. Kate forced herself to focus. The compound matched the satellite imagery: 2-story main building, smaller outbuildings, high walls, single gate, guard positions at the corners. Thornton studied the scene through the spotting scope. "Count the tangos." Sullivan scanned methodically. 6 external guards, 2 at the gate, 4 on rotating patrol. Assuming standard shift rotation, probably another 6 to 8 inside. Call it 12 to 15 total. "Matches our intel," Thornton said. He looked at Kate. "Brennan, set up the satellite feed." Kate pulled out her laptop and connected to the secure satellite link. Her hands were still shaking, but she managed to establish connection. The thermal overlay appeared on screen. 12 tangos visible, she confirmed. 6 external, 6 internal. No sign of the hostage yet. "She's in there," Thornton said. Intel said 2nd floor, northeast corner. Kate adjusted the thermal imaging, focusing on the 2nd floor. The heat signatures were clustered in other parts of the building. The northeast corner showed nothing. "I'm not seeing anyone in that location, sir," Kate said. "Could be below thermal detection. Basement, maybe." Thornton pulled out the architectural plans. "Building's old. Soviet-era construction from the 70s. Reinforced rooms," Kate interrupted, then immediately regretted speaking. But Thornton was looking at her, waiting. Soviet construction in this region. They built redundant spaces, hardened rooms for high-value assets, usually below grade to regulate temperature. Sullivan lowered the spotting scope. "You're saying she's in a basement we don't know about?" "It's possible." Kate pulled up her architectural analysis. "Look at the thermal bloom pattern. See how the heat signatures are concentrated on the west side? That's where the generators are. But there's a secondary heat pattern here on the east side. It's faint, but it's there." She highlighted the area. A regular pulse of heat, barely visible, cycling every 18 seconds. "Could be nothing," McLeod said. "Or it could be climate control," Kate replied. "If they're keeping someone alive in a reinforced room, they'd need temperature regulation. Desert gets up to 115 degrees. Without a sea, that room becomes an oven." Thornton studied the pattern. "How confident are you?" Kate hesitated. Then she thought about Rebecca Walsh, 24 years old, probably terrified, possibly dying in a concrete box. 90%, sir, she said. That signature matches Soviet-era climate control systems. My grandfather showed me the patterns. The bloom interval is too regular to be random. Thornton exchanged glances with Sullivan. Then he nodded. We plan for a basement. If it's there, we find it. If not, we adapt. The plan was straightforward. Breach the north gate at 0400 during guard shift change. Four-man entry team: Thornton, Sullivan, McLeod, Hendricks. Kate and the remaining 2 SEALs would hold the perimeter. Brennan, Thornton said, pulling her aside, you stay with Foster and Webb. If shooting starts, you get down and stay down. Your job is to monitor communications and provide translation. You do not enter that building unless I explicitly call for you. Clear? Clear, sir. That thermal analysis was good work. If you're right about the basement, you might have just saved Walsh's life. It wasn't praise exactly, but coming from Thornton, it felt significant. They waited. Kate monitored the satellite feed, watching heat signatures move through the compound in predictable patterns. At 0345, Thornton gave the signal to move. The breach was textbook. Shaped charge on the gate. The explosion was muffled, more of a thump than a blast. The gate sagged inward. Thornton's team flowed through like water. Kate's radio crackled. Entry team inside, ground floor clear, moving to locate basement access. Seconds ticked by. The external guards were responding now, moving toward the breached gate, shouting in Arabic. Contact rear, Sullivan's voice. 2 tangos down, continuing sweep. More movement on thermal. Kate counted signatures. 6 guards neutralized. 6 remained inside. Brennan, anything on comms? Thornton asked. Kate had her radio scanner running. Most of it was panicked Arabic. But then she caught something else. Russian. She isolated the frequency, translating in real time. Entry team, be advised, Kate transmitted. Russian communication on secondary frequency. Someone's calling for backup. ETA, 20 minutes. Copy that, Thornton replied. Still looking for basement access. This building doesn't match the plans. Kate pulled up the architectural overlay. Something was wrong. The interior layout didn't align. Walls in the wrong places. Sir, the building's been modified, she said. Soviet plans show interior walls here and here, but thermal shows open space. They've renovated. Which means the basement access could be anywhere. Fuck. Thornton's frustration carried through the radio. Kate stared at the thermal image. Soviet construction doctrine. Redundancy. Hidden spaces. She thought about the climate control signature. Traced the heat bloom pattern backward. Sir, the air circulation, she said. The climate control for the basement has to vent somewhere. If we find the ventilation system, we find the basement, Thornton finished. Where's the vent? Kate highlighted the area, transmitted coordinates. East wall, ground floor, should be disguised. Check behind any large furniture or... Got it, Sullivan's voice cut in. Floor access behind a weapons rack. Concrete stairs going down, moving to clear. Kate exhaled. Foster and Webb were watching her with expressions closer to respect than mockery. The radio crackled. Basement secure. Hostage located. Walsh is alive. Repeat. Package is secure. Relief flooded through Kate. Brennan, we've got a problem. Thornton's voice was tight now. There's a laptop down here. Files in Russian. We need immediate translation. Sir, I'm at the perimeter. I need you in here now. Foster, Webb, escort Brennan to my position. Move. Kate's stomach dropped. She'd been specifically told to stay outside. Foster and Webb were already moving, and she had no choice but to follow. The compound was chaos, bodies on the ground. Foster led her through the breached gate, across the courtyard, into the building. They descended concrete stairs into the basement. The space was exactly what Kate had predicted. Soviet-era construction, reinforced walls, climate control humming. And in the corner, Rebecca Walsh, alive, but barely. Blonde hair matted, wrists zip-tied to a chair, eyes wide with terror and hope. Hendricks was already cutting her free, offering water, but Kate's attention was pulled to the laptop on the metal table. Thornton stood over it, his expression grim. "Tell me what this says," he ordered. Kate moved to the screen. The files were in Russian, technical documents with shipping manifests and chemical formulas. She scanned through them, her blood running cold. "This is a weapons transfer," she said slowly. "Chemical weapons. VX nerve agent. 4 canisters, military grade." "Jesus Christ," McLeod breathed. Kate kept reading. "They're being moved tonight, to Munich. There's a NATO defense conference scheduled there in 3 days. 3,000 attendees, including heads of state." The basement went silent except for Rebecca's quiet sobbing. Thornton's jaw was tight. "Exfiltration." Kate found the coordinates. "Secondary location, 2 kilometers north. Warehouse complex. They're loading the weapons now for transport." "When?" Sullivan asked. Kate checked the timestamp. 20 minutes ago. They said final loading in 40 minutes. She looked at her watch. "We've got 20 minutes left, maybe less." Thornton pulled out his radio. "Ironside, this is Sierra 1. We've secured the package, but we've got a problem. Chemical weapons. VX. Moving tonight to Munich. Request permission to interdict." The pause was long. "Sierra 1, your mission is hostage extraction," Blackwood's voice came through. "You are not equipped or authorized for WMD interdiction. Extract Walsh and return to Rally Point." Thornton looked at Kate, then at the laptop. "Sir, if we let those chemicals leave Syria, they're used on civilian population. We can prevent that." "Negative, Sierra 1. You have 4 operators, 1 analyst, and 1 civilian to protect. The secondary location is unknown threat strength. This is not your mission." Kate's mind was racing. She thought about the NATO conference, 3,000 people. She thought about VX nerve agent. A single drop meant death in minutes. "Commander," she said before she could stop herself, "I can guide them to the location. I know these streets." Everyone looked at her. "How?" Thornton asked. "My grandfather worked Berlin Station during the Cold War, but he also did time in the Middle East, Damascus, Baghdad. He showed me the maps, the Soviet-built infrastructure. This warehouse complex, I recognize the designation. It's part of a Soviet logistics network from the 80s. I can get us there." "Brennan," Blackwood's voice was steel, "you are not qualified for direct action." "Sir, with respect, if those chemicals reach Munich, thousands die. We can stop it." "At what cost? You're not a combat operator. You'll be a liability." The word hit like a physical blow. But Kate thought about Rebecca Walsh, who'd gone to a war zone to build orphanages. About her father, who'd run toward danger. "Then let me prove I'm not, sir," she said quietly. The radio was silent. Kate could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, Blackwood spoke. "Sierra 1, decision is yours. Your boots on ground. But understand, you split your team, you risk everything." Thornton looked at his team. Sullivan gave a tiny nod. McLeod's expression was unreadable. "We're going," Thornton decided. "Hendricks, Foster, Webb, you extract Walsh to Rally Point. Call for immediate pickup. Rest of us move on the warehouse. We've got 18 minutes." The team split with brutal efficiency. That left 4 of them: Thornton, Sullivan, McLeod, and Kate. "Brennan," Thornton said, checking his rifle, "you navigate, that's your job. You stay in the middle of our formation. If we make contact, you get down and stay down. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Sullivan, point. McLeod, rear security. I'll stay with Brennan." He pulled out a map. "Show me the route." Kate studied the map. The warehouse was 2 kilometers north-northwest. The most direct route was open ground, fast but exposed. The safer route used a wadi system, slower but covered. "We don't have time for slow," Sullivan said. Open ground it is, Kate confirmed, tracing the route. 2 clicks. We can make it in 15 minutes if we move fast. Then we move fast, Thornton said. Let's go. They exited through a side door, slipping into the darkness. The terrain was open and exposed. Sullivan set a punishing pace. Kate had to sprint to keep up. Her legs were already exhausted. Now they were being asked to do it again, faster. They'd covered maybe 800 meters when Kate heard it. Engine sounds from the south. Vehicles. Multiple. Contact rear, McLeod called out. Technicals. 2 of them. Kate risked a glance back. Headlights cutting through the darkness. Toyota trucks with machine guns mounted in the beds. How far to the warehouse? Thornton demanded. Kate checked her mental map. 1,200 meters. We can't outrun technicals in open ground, Sullivan said. The vehicles were closing fast. Kate's mind raced through options. Then she saw it. A depression in the ground 50 meters east. There, she pointed, the wadi. It's narrow, but deep enough for defilade. The gun trucks can't angle down. They'll dismount and come after us on foot, McLeod argued. Then we hold them until extract, Thornton decided. Move! They sprinted for the wadi, sliding down the bank as the technicals roared past, then screeched to a halt. Doors opened. Men shouting. At least a dozen fighters. Ironside, this is Sierra 1, Thornton radioed. We are pinned down. Request immediate air support. Sierra 1, closest air asset is 8 minutes out. Can you hold? 8 minutes. Kate looked at their position. 4 people in a ditch with maybe a dozen hostiles closing in. We'll hold, Thornton replied. The first shots came from the south. Rifle fire, poorly aimed but high volume. The SEALs returned fire with precision. Kate pressed herself flat against the wadi wall. Brennan, Sullivan called out. You said you know this area. Any other ways out? Kate forced herself to think. The wadi system. Soviet-era construction. Redundancy. The wadi continues north, she said. If it connects to the irrigation system from the Soviet agricultural projects, it should run all the way to the warehouse complex. Should? McLeod said between shots. Parts could be collapsed, but it's our best option. Thornton made the decision in seconds. We moved north through the wadi, bounding Overwatch. Sullivan, point. Brennan stays with me. McLeod covers our 6. Move! They displaced north along the wadi bed. Kate's heart was hammering. This was real bullets making real sounds as they cracked past her head. The wadi narrowed after 200 meters. They rounded a bend and found exactly what Kate had predicted. A concrete culvert, Soviet-era construction, leading deeper into the earth. That it? Thornton asked. Should be, Kate replied. Should be isn't good enough. It's all we've got, sir. Thornton looked back. The enemy was still pursuing. Forward was unknown. Backward was certain death. Into the culvert, he ordered. The culvert was dark and narrow, maybe 4 feet in diameter. They moved in single file, weapons raised. Kate's breathing echoed off the walls. If they met resistance in here, there was nowhere to go. They'd moved maybe 150 meters when Sullivan raised his fist. Halt signal. Wire, Sullivan whispered. Kate edged forward. A tripwire stretched across the culvert at ankle height. She followed the wire to a metal canister mounted on the wall. Her blood went cold. Soviet S-mine, she breathed. Bouncing Betty. Can you disarm it? Thornton asked. Kate stared at the device. She'd seen diagrams, studied the mechanisms, but that was theory. This was a live mine with 3 lives depending on her. I think so, she said. Think isn't good enough. It's all I have, sir. Behind them, voices echoed down the culvert. The enemy was following. You've got 3 minutes, Thornton said. Kate edged forward, her hands shaking. She thought about her grandfather's training, about the nights spent studying Soviet weapons systems. The S-mine was simple but devastating. Pressure-activated trigger that launched the charge into the air before detonation. Maximum casualties in confined spaces. Her grandfather's voice in memory. They always include redundancy, primary and secondary detonation systems. Find the secondary, disconnect it first. Kate traced the wiring. Primary wire, red and faded. Secondary wire, running parallel. The junction box was mounted behind the main charge. "Talk me through what you're doing," Thornton said quietly. "There are two detonation systems," Kate explained. "Secondary wire runs to a backup blasting cap. I need to disconnect it first, or disabling the primary will trigger the secondary. And if you're wrong, then we all die very quickly." She reached for the junction box, finding the screws. They were corroded. She had to force them. Behind them, the voices were getting closer. McLeod shifted position, rifle pointing back. 2 minutes, Thornton said. Kate got the box open. Inside, the wiring was exactly as she remembered. Green wire to secondary cap, yellow to primary, blue to pressure trigger. She needed to disconnect green first. Her hands were shaking too badly. She couldn't get a grip. "Brennan," Sullivan said, his voice calm. "Breathe, just like the range. Slow your breathing." Kate closed her eyes, forced herself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. When she opened her eyes, her hands were steadier. She gripped the green wire, traced it to the connection point, and carefully disconnected it from the blasting cap. Nothing happened. "Secondary's clear," she whispered. 1 minute, Thornton said. Now for the primary. The pressure trigger was still active. If she bumped it wrong, the mine would launch. She examined the trigger mechanism. A simple pressure plate connected to a spring-loaded striker. She found the locking pin that held the striker in place. A safety measure, probably engaged when the mine was placed. She carefully rotated the locking pin 90 degrees and withdrew it. The tension on the spring released. The mine was safe. "Clear," Kate said, exhaling. "It's clear." "Move," Thornton ordered. They pushed past the mine and continued. Behind them, the enemy voices grew louder, then suddenly cut off. Either they'd spotted the tripwire or triggered it. The culvert opened into a larger space after another 100 meters, a junction point where multiple tunnels met. Kate checked her mental map. "We're under the warehouse complex," she said. "These tunnels were designed for utilities and emergency access. There should be a service ladder somewhere." Sullivan found it, a rusty metal ladder leading up to a hatch. He tested the first rung. It held. "I'll go first," he said. "Clear the top, then Brennan, then Thornton, then McLeod." He climbed quickly. At the top, he examined the hatch, then carefully pushed it open a crack. Light spilled down. "Clear," he whispered, and disappeared through. Kate climbed next, her exhausted muscles screaming. She pulled herself through the hatch into a storage room. Concrete floor, metal shelves, industrial lighting. And through the doorway, the warehouse. It was massive, maybe 200 feet on a side, with a ceiling 30 feet high. And in the center, surrounded by armed guards, sat 4 metal containers, each one marked with Cyrillic lettering and hazard symbols Kate recognized immediately. V.X. Nerve agent. Enough to kill everyone in Munich 100 times over. Thornton and McLeod came through the hatch behind her. The 4 of them stood in the storage room, looking at an impossible situation. 12 guards visible, probably more in the offices. A convoy of trucks being loaded outside, and chemical weapons that absolutely could not be allowed to leave. "Ironside, Sierra 1, Thornton radioed. "We're at the warehouse. Eyes on the weapons. Advise." "Air support is 3 minutes out," Blackwood replied. "Can you mark the target?" "Negative. Weapons are inside the building. Airstrike will crack the canisters. We'll kill everyone within a mile, including us." "Then what's the play?" Thornton looked at Kate. "Brennan?" Kate's mind raced. 12 guards, 4 operators. Terrible odds. But the trucks were already being loaded. In minutes, those chemicals would be gone. She thought about her father running toward an IED, about her grandfather outwitting KGB agents, about Rebecca Walsh building schools in war zones, about proving she wasn't a liability. I have an idea, Kate said, but you're not going to like it. Thornton's eyes were hard. I'm listening. Kate pointed to the office area on the second level, visible through the grimy windows. The guards are focused on loading the trucks. Their commanding control is up there. I can see radio equipment. If we can make them think we're calling in an airstrike, they'll evacuate. Standard Soviet doctrine. Preserve personnel over material when facing superior force. We don't have an airstrike, McLeod said. They don't know that. Kate pulled out her radio scanner. I've been monitoring their communications. They're using old Soviet frequencies. If I broadcast on their command channel in Russian, claim to be forward air control calling in coordinates, Sullivan shook his head. They'll verify. Not if their command is the one giving the order. Kate's fingers were already working the radio. Volkov's not here. I haven't heard his voice. That means someone else is running this. Someone lower down the chain. Someone who might panic if they think American air power is about to level this building. Thornton studied her. You can fake a Russian accent well enough to pass? My grandfather was CIA. He didn't just teach me the language. He taught me how to sound like I belonged. Kate met his eyes. I can do this. Thornton looked at Sullivan and McLeod. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Sullivan nodded. It's a good plan, the chief said. Creative. Might work. Might? McLeod echoed. That's a hell of a word to bet our lives on. You have a better idea? Thornton asked. Silence. All right, Brennan, do it. But if this goes sideways, we fight our way out. Kate adjusted her radio to the command frequency. She took a breath, centering herself, thinking about all those nights in her grandfather's study. Learning not just words, but cadence, inflection, the rhythm of Russian spoken by military professionals. She keyed the microphone and spoke in flawless Russian, her voice taking on the clipped, authoritative tone of a Soviet officer. All units, this is forward air control. American strike package inbound to your position. F-18s armed with JDAMs. Coordinates already transmitted. Impact in 4 minutes. Evacuate immediately. Repeat, evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. The response was immediate chaos. Voices erupted on the radio, confused questions, demands for verification. Kate watched through the window as guards looked up. A new voice cut through the chatter. Older, seasoned. Forward air control, authenticate. Who authorized this strike? Kate's heart hammered. This was the moment. If she hesitated, the whole deception would collapse. She thought about her grandfather, about the lies that had to be perfect because imperfect lies got people killed. Authorization came from Damascus Command, she replied in Russian, her voice hard and impatient. You want to argue with me while American bombs are in the air? Be my guest. Die with the weapons. Or get your men out and live to fight another day. Another pause. Kate could almost hear the calculation happening. All units, the voice finally ordered. Evacuate to the rally point. Move now. Through the window, Kate watched the guards abandon their posts, scrambling for exits, engines starting as trucks peeled away without their cargo. Within 60 seconds, the warehouse floor was empty. Holy shit, McLeod breathed. That actually worked. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they realize there's no airstrike, Kate said. We need to secure those canisters. Thornton was already moving. Sullivan, McLeod, perimeter security. Brennan, you're with me. They descended to the warehouse floor. The space felt enormous now that it was empty. Kate approached the metal containers, studying the Cyrillic markings. VX nerve agent, she confirmed. Military grade. Each canister contains approximately 20 liters. That's enough to kill roughly 50,000 people if dispersed properly. Jesus, Thornton muttered. How do we move them? Kate examined the containers. They're stable as long as the seals aren't compromised. We can move them, but carefully. Very carefully. Ironside, Sierra 1, Thornton radioed. We have control of the weapons. 4 canisters VX, intact. Request immediate extraction with hazmat protocols. Sierra 1, good work. Blackwood's voice actually sounded relieved. Air support is overhead. We're vectoring in extraction helicopters. ETA 12 minutes. Can you hold? Affirm. The shot came from nowhere. 1 second Thornton was standing, the next he was on the ground, his leg bleeding from a through and through. Contact, Sullivan's voice. We've got 1 Tango, second level office. He didn't evacuate. More shots. The crack of an AK-47 on full auto. Kate threw herself behind the chemical containers, her rifle up but useless. She couldn't see the shooter. Tango's in hardened position, McLeod called out. Office has reinforced walls. Can't get an angle. Kate looked at Thornton. He was applying pressure to his leg wound, his face pale but controlled. How bad? She asked. I'll live, but I'm not moving fast. He pulled out a tourniquet and started applying it. Sullivan, status. Pinned down. This guy knows what he's doing. Every time we try to maneuver, he's got the angle covered. Kate's mind raced. 1 shooter, hardened position, holding off 3 trained operators. She pulled up the architectural overlay on her mental map. The second-level office, Soviet construction, redundant positions. He's moving, Kate said. The office isn't 1 room. It's connected to adjacent spaces through internal doors. He shoots from 1 position, then relocates before you can return fire. Classic Soviet defensive doctrine. Can't hit what we can't see, McLeod growled. Kate studied the warehouse layout. The office level had windows overlooking the main floor, but it also had, there, a ventilation system, large ducts running from the offices to the roof. I can flush him out, Kate said. Negative, Thornton snapped. You're not qualified for... Sir, with respect, I'm the only one who's not pinned down. Sullivan and McLeod can't move without exposing themselves. You're wounded. That leaves me. To do what, exactly? Kate pointed to the ventilation system. Those ducts connect to the office level. If I can get into the system, I can move through it to a position behind his defensive line. Come at him from an angle he's not expecting. That's insane, McLeod said. You're not an assaulter. You freeze up in combat. The words stung because they were true. But she thought about the mine in the tunnel, about the Russian deception, about every moment where she'd been told she couldn't. Maybe I was freezing because I was trying to be something I'm not, Kate said. You're right, I'm not an assaulter. I'm an analyst. And an analyst doesn't charge head first. An analyst finds the unexpected angle and exploits it. Another burst of gunfire. Sullivan returned fire, but the shots ricocheted off concrete. Thornton looked at Kate with an expression she'd never seen before. Not doubt, something closer to calculation. If you do this, he said slowly, you follow my commands exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. You get into position, you call out the Tango's location, and we take the shot. Clear? Clear, sir. Sullivan, McLeod, keep him occupied. Brennan, move. Kate ran to the ventilation access point, a metal grate set into the wall. The screws were old, but she managed to work them loose with her knife. The duct beyond was narrow, maybe 2 feet in diameter, but Kate was small. She crawled into the duct, pulling herself forward on her elbows. The metal was cold. Every movement seemed impossibly loud, but the sounds of gunfire below covered her advance. The duct system was a maze, but Kate had studied the plans. Left at the first junction, up the vertical shaft to the second level, right toward the office complex. She counted her movements, keeping the mental map aligned with her physical position. After what felt like hours but was probably 3 minutes, she reached a grate overlooking the office. Through the slats, she could see the shooter. Male, maybe 40, wearing tactical gear. He was moving between positions exactly as Kate had predicted. More importantly, she could see what he was protecting. In the corner of the office sat a laptop, still open, screen glowing, and next to it, a satellite phone. This wasn't just a random guard. This was someone important. Kate keyed her radio, whispering, I've got eyes on the Tango, second-level office, northeast corner. But there's something else. Laptop and sat phone. He's not just a guard. Can you ID him? Thornton asked. Kate adjusted her position, trying to get a better angle. The man turned slightly, and she saw his profile. Older than she'd first thought, 50 maybe, weathered face, distinctive scar running from his left eye to his jaw, and hanging from his belt, a knife. A Spetsnaz-issue combat blade, Soviet era, the kind that hadn't been manufactured in 30 years. Kate's blood went cold. "Sir," she whispered, "I think that's Volkov, Dmitry Volkov himself." The silence on the radio was deafening. "You're certain?" Blackwood's voice cut in. "Scar matches the photo, and he's carrying a Spetsnaz combat knife, vintage 1980s. How many arms dealers in Syria fit that profile?" "Only one," Blackwood confirmed. "If you've got Volkov, he's priority target. But Brennan, you are not authorized for direct engagement. Identify and mark. Let the assaulters handle him." Kate watched Volkov through the grate. He fired another burst at Sullivan's position, then turned back to the laptop. He was typing quickly. Whatever he was doing on that computer, it wasn't good. "He's on the laptop," Kate reported, "typing something. Could be wiping data, could be sending final coordinates. If we wait for a shot, we might lose whatever intel he's accessing." "Still not your job," Thornton said, his voice tight with pain. Volkov stood suddenly, grabbing the laptop. He was leaving. Moving toward a back exit Kate could see through the grate. If he escaped with that computer, they'd lose everything. The buyers, the network, the next attack. Kate made a decision. She kicked open the grate and dropped into the office. The fall was only 8 feet, but she hit hard. Volkov spun, his rifle coming up, and for a frozen second they stared at each other. Then training took over. Kate's rifle was already up, sight picture acquired, finger on the trigger, but Volkov was faster. He dove behind a desk as Kate fired, her rounds punching through cheap wood, but missing flesh. "Brennan, report!" Thornton's voice in her earpiece. "Contact!" Kate called back, moving to cover as Volkov returned fire. "He's got the laptop, moving to engage." "Negative, fall back and—" Kate yanked the earpiece out. No more commands, no more hesitation, just her and Volkov, and the truth about her father's death. She moved left, using office furniture for cover. Volkov was doing the same on the right, and they circled each other. Kate's heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. This wasn't about groupings at 200 yards. This was about survival. "You speak Russian very well," Volkov called out in English, his accent thick. "The radio deception, that was clever. Who taught you?" Kate didn't answer. She was listening to his voice, triangulating his position. "CIA, perhaps?" Volkov continued. "They recruit young these days." "I'm not a child," Kate replied. She was moving as she spoke, circling toward his flank. "No? Then what are you? Analyst? You have the look of someone who has never killed." "I know what war is." Kate could see his shadow now, cast by the fluorescent lights. "I know what it takes from people." "Do you?" "I have killed 143 men, each one necessary, each one remembered." "How many have you killed, American girl?" Kate thought about her father, about the Cornet missiles, about 18 years of growing up without him because this man had sold weapons to insurgents. "None," she admitted, "but I'm about to start." She stepped around the filing cabinet, rifle raised. Volkov was there, but he wasn't aiming at her. He was aiming at the chemical canisters on the floor below, visible through the office window. "Stalemate," he said calmly. "You shoot me, I shoot the canisters. VX disperses. We all die. Very unpleasant." Kate kept her rifle trained on him but didn't fire. He was right. One round into those canisters and the nerve agent would kill everyone in the building. "You're not going to shoot them," Kate said. "You die too." "Perhaps. But perhaps I am old and tired and would rather die than spend the rest of my life in American prison." Volkov's finger was on the trigger. Or perhaps I am bluffing. Are you willing to risk it? Kate's mind raced. Shoot him before he can fire. But he was already aimed, already prepared. Call for backup. But by the time Sullivan or McLeod repositioned, Volkov could fire. Then she noticed something. The laptop was sitting on the desk between them, still open, and the screen showed a file transfer in progress. The buyers, Kate said, you're sending them the coordinates for the backup weapons cache. That's what you've been doing. Volkov's expression didn't change, but Kate saw the flicker in his eyes. She was right. There are more chemicals, she continued. This wasn't the only cache. You wouldn't put all your inventory in one location. That's not Soviet doctrine. You'd have redundancy, backup caches in multiple locations. Very good, Volkov said. Yes, there are more weapons. And yes, I was transmitting their locations when you interrupted. If I let you leave with that laptop, hundreds die. If you shoot me, we all die. Choose, American girl. Choose quickly. My finger is getting tired. Kate looked at the laptop. At the file transfer bar, 68% complete. At Volkov's finger on the trigger. At the chemical canisters below. And she made her choice. She shot the laptop. The round punched through the screen, destroying the hard drive, severing the connection. The file transfer died instantly. Volkov's eyes widened in surprise, and in that split second, Kate adjusted her aim and fired again. The bullet hit Volkov's rifle, striking the receiver, and the weapon jumped from his hands. Before he could recover, Kate was on him. No formal training, no martial arts mastery, just 18 years of rage and grief and determination. She slammed into him, and they went down together. Volkov was stronger, more experienced. He got his hands around her throat, squeezing. Kate's vision started to tunnel. She couldn't breathe, but she could remember. Her grandfather's voice. In close combat, use what they don't expect. Kate stopped trying to break his grip. Instead, she drove her thumbs into his eyes. Volkov screamed and released her. Kate rolled away, gasping for air, and grabbed the Spetsnaz knife from his belt. When Volkov came at her again, she was ready. The blade caught him across the forearm, a defensive slash that made him back away. Blood welled from the cut. You know how to use a knife, Volkov said, breathing hard. Your grandfather taught you this too? Everything I know, Kate replied, the knife steady in her hand. I learned from people who spent their lives fighting men like you. Men like me? Volkov laughed bitterly. You think you know who I am? I know you sold Kornet missiles to Iraqi insurgents in 2006. I know those missiles killed my father, Colonel David Brennan, Fallujah. Ring any bells? Volkov's expression changed. Brennan, yes, I remember. The Marine convoy, 3 vehicles destroyed. He smiled. Your father died well, if it helps. Quickly. The Kornet is very efficient. Kate felt something break inside her, some final restraint. She attacked, not with rage, not with hatred, with the cold calculation of someone who had finally accepted what she was capable of. The knife work wasn't elegant. It was brutal and efficient, the way her grandfather had taught her. Cut the tendons, disable the threat, survive. Volkov tried to counter, but he was older, wounded, and surprised by the ferocity. She drove him backward, the knife finding flesh twice more. Not killing blows, she needed him alive for interrogation, but enough to make him understand she was done being underestimated. When he finally went down, Kate stood over him with the knife at his throat. The other weapons caches, she said. Locations. Now. Volkov coughed blood. Or what? You kill me? I thought you had never killed before. I haven't, Kate replied. But for you, I'm willing to make an exception. Below them, the warehouse door burst open. Sullivan and McLeod entered, rifles raised. Thornton limped in behind them. Brennan, Thornton called up. Status. Secured, Kate called back. I have Volkov, alive, and we need to talk to him. She looked down at the man who'd killed her father. who'd sold death across the Middle East for 30 years. The caches, Kate repeated. Volkov was silent. Then he smiled through bloody teeth. You will not get them from me with threats. I don't need to threaten you. Kate pulled out her radio, switching to the frequency she'd used earlier. She spoke in Russian, but this time her voice was different, colder. All units, this is forward air control. Dmitry Volkov has been captured by American forces. He is cooperating fully, providing locations of all weapons caches. Any personnel attempting to access these locations will be considered hostile. She looked at Volkov. I just told your entire network that you're a traitor, that you're giving up everything. How long do you think you survive once that gets out? Volkov's expression went from confident to horrified. You cannot. They will kill my family. Then I suggest you give me those locations very quickly, because the longer this message broadcasts, the more people hear it. It was a bluff, cruel and calculated, and exactly the kind of thing her grandfather would have done. But it worked. Damascus, Volkov said quickly. Industrial District, Warehouse Complex, Section 7. And Aleppo, underground bunker beneath the old hospital. Those are the only other caches. Kate relayed the information to Thornton, who was already calling it in. Ironside, Sierra 1, Thornton said. We have locations for additional chemical weapons. Transmitting coordinates. Request immediate interdiction. Already tasking assets, Blackwood replied. Outstanding work, Sierra 1. Extraction birds are 2 minutes out. Get your team and that prisoner to the LZ. Kate stepped back from Volkov. Sullivan and McLeod came up the stairs, zip-tied Volkov's hands, and hauled him to his feet. That was the stupidest, most reckless thing I've ever seen, McLeod said to Kate. But he was grinning. Also, pretty badass. I need that earpiece back, Kate said. Thornton retrieved it, examined it, then handed it to her. You pulled it out, during combat, after I gave you a direct order to fall back. Yes, sir, I did. Why? Kate met his eyes. Because I knew you were going to tell me to retreat, and I knew if I retreated, we'd lose Volkov and the intelligence. So I made a tactical decision to disobey. Analysts don't make tactical decisions in combat. Operators do. Then maybe I'm not just an analyst anymore, sir. Thornton studied her. Then he smiled. No, he said quietly. I don't think you are. The extraction was textbook. 2 MH-60S helicopters touched down in open ground adjacent to the warehouse. One took Volkov and the chemical weapons under heavy guard. The other took Kate's team. As the helicopter lifted off, Kate looked down at the warehouse growing smaller below them. The place where she'd stopped being the analyst they mocked and started being something else. Thornton was in the crew chief's seat, his leg elevated and bandaged. He caught Kate's eye and gestured for her to come closer. That move in the office, he said, shooting the laptop instead of Volkov. Where'd you learn that? I didn't, Kate admitted. I just thought about what my grandfather would do. He always said the obvious target isn't always the right target. Your grandfather sounds like he was a smart man. He is. Kate looked out at the Syrian desert passing beneath him. I should call him when we land. Tell him his granddaughter disarmed a Soviet mine, deceived an entire guard force with a fake airstrike, infiltrated a hostile position through ventilation ducts, and captured one of the most wanted arms dealers in the Middle East. Thornton's expression was serious. Tell him she did what experienced operators couldn't have done. Tell him she saved lives. Kate felt something in her chest. Not quite pride, but maybe acceptance. Sir, she said, when we were pinned down, when I said I had an idea and you let me try it. Why? Thornton was quiet, watching the desert scroll past. Commander Blackwood called me while you were asleep on the flight over. Told me something I hadn't considered. What? He said your father was the best Marine he'd ever served with. Not because David Brennan was the strongest or fastest, but because he could see 3 moves ahead, could predict what the enemy would do. Had a brain that processed information like a tactical computer. Thornton looked at her. Blackwood said if you inherited even half of that, you'd be worth 10 regular operators. And you believed him? I believed he wouldn't risk his people's lives on nepotism. So I watched you. The way you identified the basement, the way you spotted that mine, the way you thought through problems instead of reacting. He paused. You were never going to be a door kicker. You were never going to outshoot Sullivan or outfight McLeod. But you didn't need to, because you had something they don't. What's that, sir? You see the angles, the unexpected approaches, the solutions that aren't obvious. Thornton shifted his injured leg. That's not analyst thinking. That's operator thinking. Just a different kind than we're used to. McLeod leaned over. Hey, Brennan, that betting pool I started? The one about you quitting? Yeah? I lost $100, and I've never been happier to lose money in my life. They landed at the FOB 40 minutes later. Medical personnel rushed Thornton to surgery. Volkov was transferred to intelligence for interrogation. The chemical weapons were secured in containment, awaiting disposal teams. Kate found herself in the debriefing room with Commander Blackwood and a colonel from Joint Special Operations Command. They went through everything methodically. When she got to the part about disobeying Thornton's order and engaging Volkov directly, she expected reprimand. Instead, the JSOC colonel just nodded. Tactically sound decision given the intelligence value at stake, he said. Unorthodox, but effective. After 2 hours, they finally let her go. Kate walked out into the Iraqi sunset, her body aching. Blackwood was waiting outside. Walk with me, he said. They moved through the FOB in silence, past tactical vehicles and equipment, past soldiers who gave Blackwood respectful nods. Finally, they reached a quiet corner near the perimeter wall. Rebecca Walsh is safe, Blackwood said. She's being flown back to the States tomorrow, thanks to you. Thanks to the team, sir. The team that you guided to the right location, that you navigated through a minefield. Blackwood turned to face her. Kate, I need to tell you something. About your father. Kate's stomach tightened. Sir, when I told you he saved my life in Fallujah, that was true, but I didn't tell you the whole truth. Blackwood pulled out a photograph. It showed 2 Marines in desert camo, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning. One was Blackwood, younger but recognizable. The other was clearly Kate's father. Your father and I served together for 8 years, Blackwood continued. Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq. He was my best friend. And 3 days before he died, we had a conversation about you. About me? He knew the deployment was dangerous, so he asked me, if anything happened, to watch out for you. Not to baby you, not to protect you, but to watch, to see what you became. And if you ever needed help finding your path, to give you the push. Kate stared at the photograph. Her father looked so young, so alive. This mission, she said slowly, you bringing me, was that the push? Partially, but mostly it was legitimate need. Everything I told you was true. We needed your language skills, your analytical mind, your knowledge of Soviet tactics. But yes, I also wanted to see what you were made of, whether you'd run or fight. And, Blackwood smiled, you have more than his courage, Kate. You have his intelligence, his ability to see the whole battlefield. And you have something he never had. You know how to use your brain as a weapon, not just your body. He handed her the photograph. Keep this. Remember that your father would be proud, not because you followed in his footsteps, but because you carved your own path. Kate took the photo, her hands trembling. What happens now, sir? Now, you get some sleep. Tomorrow you write your after-action report, and then we talk about your future. My future? The intelligence community has a new task force forming. Hybrid operators, people who can think and fight, analyze and execute, people who don't fit the traditional mold because there's something new. Blackwood's expression was serious. We want people who can disarm minds and deceive enemies and see the angles nobody else sees. We want you." Kate's heart was racing. "I'm not qualified. I barely passed physical training. My shooting scores..." "Your shooting scores are adequate. Your physical conditioning is acceptable. But your tactical thinking, your ability to operate under pressure, your capacity for creative problem solving." Blackwood shook his head. "Those are exceptional. We can teach you to shoot better. We can train your body, but we can't teach what you have naturally." "What do I have naturally, sir?" "The ability to win fights without firing a shot. The intelligence to know when violence is necessary and when deception works better. The courage to trust your judgment, even when everyone's telling you you're wrong." He gestured back toward operations. "Lieutenant Thornton is already writing his recommendation. Chief Sullivan and Petty Officer McLeod are doing the same." Kate was speechless. "You don't have to decide now," Blackwood continued. "Take some time, think about it. But understand, you proved something out there. Not just to us, to yourself. You're not just an analyst anymore. You're not just David Brennan's daughter. You're Catherine Brennan, and you're something we've never quite seen before." He left her there, holding the photograph of her father, watching the sunset over the Iraqi desert. 3 days later, Kate stood in Arlington National Cemetery. The flight back had been long and quiet. Now she was home, and there was one more thing she needed to do. Her father's grave was in Section 60, where the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans were buried. The headstone was simple, white marble. "Colonel David Brennan, United States Marine Corps, beloved father and hero killed in action, Fallujah, Iraq." Kate knelt and placed the photograph there, the one of her father and Blackwood grinning in the desert. "I met Volkov," she said quietly, "the man who sold the missiles. I had him at knife point, and for a second, I thought about killing him. For you." The cemetery was quiet except for the wind. "But I didn't, because that's not what you would have wanted. You didn't run toward that IED for revenge. You did it to save your men, to do the right thing even when it was the hard thing." She pulled out something else, a patch, Navy Intelligence Operations Officer, the position Blackwood had offered her. "Everyone keeps telling me what you would have wanted, what you would have thought." Kate traced her fingers over the engraved letters. "But I realized something out there. I can't live my life trying to be you. I have to be me. And maybe that's okay." She placed the patch next to the photograph. "I don't know if I'm going to take the job. It scares me. The idea of doing this for real, as a career, of putting myself in danger over and over, of maybe not coming home one day, just like you." She paused. "But it also excites me. The idea of using everything grandfather taught me, everything you would have taught me if you'd had the chance. The idea of making a difference." A groundskeeper was working nearby, trimming grass. Kate watched him for a moment. "They mocked me," she said, "called me daddy's girl, said I couldn't shoot, couldn't fight, couldn't survive. And they were right about a lot of it, but they were wrong about one thing." She stood up, her decision made. "They were wrong about what I could become when I stopped trying to be you and started being me." The final meeting happened a week later, back at Naval Base San Diego. Kate walked into Commander Blackwood's office in her dress uniform. Lieutenant Thornton was there, walking with a cane but mobile. Chief Sullivan, Petty Officer McLeod, even Hendricks, Foster, and Webb. The entire team assembled. "Analyst Brennan," Blackwood said formally, "please sit." Kate sat, feeling the weight of all their eyes. "The after-action reports have been filed," Blackwood continued. "The mission has been classified at the highest levels. You will never be able to discuss the details with anyone outside this room." "I understand, sir. That said, the people in this room know what you did, and we've all agreed on something." Thornton stepped forward. He was holding a small box. "The Navy doesn't give out medals for classified missions," he said. "Nothing official. But this team has a tradition. When someone proves themselves in combat, when they save lives and complete impossible missions, we recognize them our own way. He opened the box. Inside was a trident pin, the seal insignia. Not an official one, smaller, older, clearly personal. "This was your father's," Thornton said. "Commander Blackwood kept it after Fallujah. He asked me to give it to you. Not because you're a SEAL, you're not, and you don't need to be, but because you operated with us, bled with us, saved our asses when we needed it most." Kate took the pin with shaking hands. The metal was warm, worn smooth by years of wear. "There's something else," Blackwood said. He slid a folder across his desk. "Your orders. Effective immediately, you're being reassigned to a new unit. Joint Special Operations Command, Intelligence Operations Division. You'll undergo additional training, shooting, close quarters combat, survival skills, not to make you a door kicker, but to make you a more effective hybrid operator." Kate opened the folder. The orders were real. Official. "Your first mission briefing is in 3 weeks," Blackwood continued. "Cold War weapons tracking. There are caches all over Eastern Europe and the Middle East, Soviet-era stockpiles that went missing when the USSR collapsed. Your job will be to find them, analyze them, and help teams interdict them." "My grandfather's specialty," Kate said quietly. "Your specialty now, too." Blackwood stood. "You've earned this, Kate, not because of who your father was, not because I owed him a debt, because you're the right person for this job." Kate looked at the team, at Thornton with his cane and his grudging respect, at Sullivan and McLeod, who'd gone from mocking her to requesting her. "I accept," she said. McLeod grinned. "Outstanding, because I've got a new betting pool going. $20 says on your first training evolution, you smoke half the male recruits on the written exam." "Only half?" Kate smiled. "I'm insulted." "All right, smartass, 50 says you smoke all of them." "You're on." The meeting ended. The team dispersed, but Blackwood asked Kate to stay. When they were alone, he pulled out one more thing. A file folder, old and worn. "Your grandfather asked me to give you this," he said. "He said you'd know when you were ready." Kate opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, maps, all from her grandfather's time in the CIA. Operations in Berlin, Prague, Moscow. "He was more than just an analyst," Kate said, looking at a photo of young Warren Brennan in Cold War Berlin. "He was one of the best field operatives the agency ever had," Blackwood confirmed. "Creative, fearless, willing to take risks others wouldn't. Sound like anyone you know?" Kate closed the folder. "When did you talk to him?" "The day after you got back. He called to thank me for giving you the chance to prove yourself. Said he knew you'd been struggling to find your place. Trying to live up to your father while being your own person." Blackwood smiled. "He said the best thing I could have done was put you in a situation where you had to be yourself. Where being David Brennan's daughter wasn't enough. Where you had to be Catherine Brennan and nothing else." "Did he know how dangerous it would be?" "He's Warren Brennan. Of course he knew, and he trusted you anyway." Kate stood, holding the folder with her grandfather's legacy and the box with her father's trident. 2 legacies, 2 paths, and somehow she'd found a way to honor both while creating her own. "Sir," she said, "thank you for the push, for the trust, for seeing something in me I didn't see in myself." "Don't thank me yet," Blackwood replied. "Your next mission is going to make Syria look like a vacation. Cold War weapons in the Balkans, former Soviet operatives who really don't want to be found, and a timeline that makes this last one look generous." "Sounds perfect," Kate said, and she meant it. 6 months later, Kate stood in a different compound, in a different country, facing a different enemy, but the fundamentals were the same. Intelligence, analysis, creative thinking. She'd completed her additional training. Her shooting scores were now expert range. Her physical conditioning had improved dramatically, but more than that, she'd learned to trust herself, to know when to fight and when to think, when to follow orders and when to improvise. The mission in the Balkans had been a success. So had the one in Kazakhstan. and the one in Ukraine. Kate was building a reputation, the analyst who operated, the operator who analyzed, the woman who didn't fit in any box because she'd created her own category. Commander Thornton had become her regular team leader. Sullivan and McLeod requested assignment to her operations. Together, they developed a new model of special operations. Intelligence-led, precision-targeted, using brain power as much as firepower. Now Kate stood at another cemetery. Not Arlington this time, a small plot in Virginia where her grandfather had finally been laid to rest at age 84. Natural causes, peaceful, after a life spent in shadows and secrets. She placed a photo on his grave, not of him, but of her. Standing in front of a wall covered in maps, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the same territories he'd worked 40 years earlier. "I did it, grandfather," she said softly. "Found my own path. Turns out it looks a lot like yours, just with better technology and worse coffee." The wind rustled through the trees. Kate smiled, imagining she could hear his laugh. "They still mock me sometimes, you know. The young operators who haven't worked with me yet. They see a woman, 5'3", and assume I'm support staff. Until the mission starts, until they see what I can do." She paused. "You taught me that. That size doesn't matter. Gender doesn't matter. What matters is what you can deliver when it counts." She pulled out her phone and checked the time. 3 hours until wheels up for the next mission. Poland this time. Soviet-era chemical weapons, possibly still active. "I have to go," she said. "Duty calls. But I wanted you to know, everything you taught me, every map you showed me, every story you told, it wasn't wasted. It made me who I am." She stood, straightening her uniform. "And who I am," she said to the headstone, "is someone who gets real, who proves them wrong, who finishes what heroes like you started." Catherine Brennan walked away from the cemetery, toward the car waiting to take her to the airfield, toward another mission, another chance to honor the legacies she carried while building her own. Behind her, on her grandfather's headstone, the photos showed her surrounded by maps and mission plans, doing work that would never make the news, protecting people who would never know her name. Just like he had, just like her father had, just like she would continue to do, mission after mission, proving that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the biggest or loudest. Sometimes it's the one nobody sees coming.